I'm Erik Fisher, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and if you're listening to this as someone who has listened to part one of this conversation over at Erik Fisher's Beyond the To-Do List, if you haven't, make sure you listen to that first. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Welcome. If you are a new listener and you're joining us from that episode, welcome. This is part two of our Productivity A to Z or Z series, with my friend, of course, Erik Fisher, who is the host of Beyond the To-Do List. In this episode, which is part two of our conversation, we pick up where we left off, diving into the letters N through Z. So in that final half of the alphabet, you'll find a variety of words that we choose, some expected, some maybe not so expected, as we explore the concepts that shape how we work and live. So without further ado, this is a long one, so let's get started. Here is part two of my conversation with Erik Fisher and his conversation with me around productivity A to Z. Erik, thanks so much for joining me for part two of our crossover episode, where we're going through productivity terms from A to Z. Sorry, it's my show. I got to go with Z. Actually, but Z. Yes, so this is where the Canadian / Queen's English, I guess, comes into, or King's English, I guess now comes into play. But I'm really excited. If you have not listened to part one yet, that is on Erik's podcast, Beyond the To-Do List. I encourage you to go to listen to that. First, it came out earlier this week. And now, as we get closer, if you're listening to this in, the time that we drop it, to the end of the calendar year of 2024, we're now going to wrap up this with going through letters N to Z. We did A to M on your show. And I mean, before we get into it, we got about an hour here. So what were your thoughts on the first part that we did for your show?
Yeah, I was going to say, we both knew for the most part what words we had chosen, but there were some surprises. But not only that, there were some surprises in terms of where we went with the conversation, as well as alignment for each of us individually across that first half. And I'm curious to see if that continues through this second half. But also alignment between, where we kind of see things were and have gone, both personally as well as the entire productivity space.
Right. And we've talked about this before we hit record yesterday, I think even during, where we said we should probably revisit this like next year and see if things have changed.
See this. Yeah, I think this is an annual thing at this point. We'll just plan ahead and do it.
Which we've done. This is being recorded for the record. And again, inside baseball, by the way, we have you might see some questions that we discussed during this conversation or things that pop up from members of my Time Crafting Trust Premium community who are watching this live as we're recording this, which is in September. So we're ahead of the curve. We're walking the talk here, right? So, and now, speaking of getting into things now, the letter N, without further ado, let's get into our letters. I'm going to start with you, Erik. What was the term that you chose for the letter N?
Well, the letter N, I went with networking because it's one of the most, so before we got to M was L, and my word there was leveraging or leverage or whatever you want to call it. And, not to just leverage people, but I have found that some of the biggest lift that I get is from other people. It's a collaboration. It's being in touch with people. Heck, this right here is one of the examples of that. It's example of networking. And I think that one, I can admit I'm not good at it, but two, that's an effort I'm going to be making. Still have time. Ironically, you'll hear this in December 24, but recording it in September of 24, I can work on it until the time that you hear it. Time travel? What? Anyway, it is one of the things that I'm planning on doubling and tripling down on. In fact, I actually have been recently, so I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and December for me, my monthly theme is relationships, and networking comes into play there. Absolutely. Yeah. So this is timely, but there are timeless elements to networking as well. And my word, it kind of again relates to it to a degree, is nurturing or growth. And nurturing can come in a variety of fashions. I think it's, again, one of those softer terms. If you've been following what we've done to this point with our other words, I have been going with some of the softer qualitative terms as opposed to some of the harder pragmatic stuff, the more concrete stuff, because I think that's the stuff that can get lost in the shuffle. And nurturing is tricky because there is a time that it takes for that to really take place. And it seems not as it seems not counterintuitive, but counterproductive to a degree for some people, because it takes so long to make it happen. And it's continual progress. Growth is continual, right? So you can nurture, like you pointed out, relationships like those opportunities. You can nurture the frameworks that you've put in place. You can nurture the habits that you've got. So I think that when we think about the idea of nurturing, I think it's a really important piece when it comes to being productive. And it goes along the lines of consistency, again, quality, effort, that idea of nurturing, especially when it comes to, the internal parts, can really lead to some really incredible growth.
Yeah, it's that kind of, people use the word management, like you manage people. I like to think of it more like this with the word nurturing. You're tending to them. You're paying attention. You're seeing what's needed. It's like a garden. It's a relationship. You're doing it that way instead of I have to put this person in their place,
right,
kind of a thing.
Right. Now, remember when you listened to the previous episode, part 1 of this, which if you haven't, again, I encourage you to go back to do that. We talked about how AI, which was kind of how we got a lot of these terms to kind of show up for us as a first kind of messy draft. And then we kind of went through them and, again, nurtured that list and kind of manipulated it and so on and so forth. But the term I chose for the letter O was not there. And I think it's because it doesn't seem like it is related to productivity and time management, but it certainly is. And that's overwhelm. Overwhelm is, it's not the positive term that maybe you're looking for, but I think it's one of the reasons why, number one, it is a reason why we end up not being as productive as we can be. But it comes in many shapes and sizes, right? Like we're overwhelmed by the amount of things we have on our list. We get overwhelmed by adopting a framework to help us nurture and foster productivity practices. And it is something that can, and I talk about the elements, the things that lead to overwhelm, like overchoice, overload, overcommitment, like all of those things can lead to overwhelm. And I think that now more than ever, that term is going to probably be in the zeitgeist it's been there for a while, but I think it's going to get a lot of attention. It's not like it hasn't. Bridget Schulte wrote a book called Overwhelmed. Overwhelm does show up, but I think it's one that that will remain like a pain point for people, regardless of what you do. There will always be some sense of overwhelm. Even the fact that we can get, tools to help us get a lot of the stuff out of the way, we may very well be overwhelmed by the fact that we have so many opportunities to put qualitative efforts forth that we get stuck in, well, what should I do? So overwhelm is the one I chose. Again, maybe not be the nicest of terms or the most positive of terms, but I think it's important to keep in mind when we're trying to, again, be our most productive selves.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know that there's a day that doesn't go by where I have a moment of feeling overwhelmed, to be honest.
Yeah.
If I'm just, candid, that happens. It's just like, okay, you know what? And I think that's the thing I'm trying to avoid is like, wait a second, why does that happen? Well, it's because I haven't had any kind of, to go back to other words we mentioned yesterday or last episode, boundaries and guardrails were two of the ones that come into play with this. And so I think if you don't have those in place, then those moments of overwhelm can happen more frequently. And so it's definitely a necessity. And I think for me specifically, I was saying the word guardrails. I was like, the difference between boundaries is like that the median, or no, not the median, the shoulder. Guardrail is the metal thing that you hit that keeps you from going over, but it is your last option.
Yeah.
And so, I would say maybe you can feel overwhelmed I would say overwhelm is to burnout, or overwhelm is to boundaries as guardrails is to burnout.
Right. Yep. Well, what does Brene Brown, she talks about in her book about being in the weeds, right? Like when she was a surfer,
Yeah.
like when you're in the weeds, like you're done, like you're out, you can't function. And if you don't take care of these kind of things, then it puts you in a position to not be able to really function and do anything. And one of the things, again, these words are related that can help you deal with things like overwhelm and setting boundaries and really nurturing is your word. And what did you choose for the letter O?
Yeah, I went ahead and chose optimization or optimize, whatever you want to, but optimization. I think this is one of those ones, again, it could be a potential trap for people where you want to tweak everything all the time and just constantly be tweaking over and over again on any system, software, workflow, framework, etc. I think for me, it's all right, aim for optimization, but remember that there may always be more room to optimize. But what's your 80%? Like, know that you've got it to that point, that 80 to 90%, and know that also ultimately seasons are also in the mix. And so what's optimal for one season may not be optimal for another, and you're going to have to come back, but it's okay. Keep it at that threshold, in other words.
Yeah. And I think optimization, you much like anything else, you can end up doing productive rather than being productive with it. Like, the tinkering, the fine tuning, the refining. It's important. Again, there's seasons for this, not just seasons for what you should optimize, but seasons for, in fact, optimizing. And those seasons don't have to, for big, grand optimizing. But to your point about overwhelm, I'm finding that there's optimization happening every day to a degree in small ways. Yeah. Like you talked about the 1 degree shift or the one slight shift in the last episode. And optimization is a way to kind of make sure that shift is not going to take you totally off course, right? So optimization does play a huge role. I want to add this really quickly. Tim brings up a great point. He's a premium member. He says, it's interesting that for many of the words that we've chosen, both in your episode and as well as this one, are both cautioning about taking them to the extreme. So balance is the key. What are your thoughts on that, Erik?
Yeah, I think, again, we talked yesterday about the danger of working about the work. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember exactly where in the conversation that was, but it was kind of a tangent for a second at some point. That's the danger and I think that's one of the downfalls of people's falling off of trying to even attempt to be productive. They just say, screw it, I've tried and I can't, because they get so in the weeds with the minutia of whatever system or, again, software. It's like, no, I have to make sure that the software is perfect. There is no perfect. Mm-hmm. You don't even need the software. You could literally handwrite things and probably get by fine for the most part. But point being is that the trap is when you're spending all that, like, think of it as an athlete, overtraining to the point where then you can't perform when the time comes. That's, I guess, the best analogy I can give.
So you've dropped a couple of P words already. Perfect, which I'm sure is your word, or performative, which is another word you could have chosen, but you didn't choose that for the letter P. What did you choose?
I chose prioritization. Now, I know this is also a dangerous place where some people say, well, if you have more than one priority, you have no priorities. Well, I don't know if there's room to fudge this. I think you can have a handful of priorities, but they have to still be, there's still a hierarchy there. Mm-hmm. You have to, first, second, and third priority for this season, and then you change it up. So, like, for example, season I'm in right now, one of my priorities is very much looking forward to the next year, and also kind of closing out this current. I don't adhere or not adhere to your calendar.
Yeah.
where you
yeah.
I also don't not,
Right.
So, but it's for where I am right now. We're recording this in the fall of 2024. My daughter's at school, second year of college, and she's gone for now, but we'll be back. And so I'm thinking ahead to, what are we going to do at the time when she's back for Christmas break? How do I make sure that I'm spending more time with my son, who's in his first year of junior high, which is also different. Mm-hmm. And then also making sure that myself and my wife are spending time together enough. And then the three of us that are here at home. And then also, like, another priority is health. So it's kind of relationships under the umbrella of family and then like personal health. Those are the things I'm really trying to be conscious about. Those are priorities. And they don't conflict. In fact, if you have more than one priority, the best thing to do is, well, let my son and I take the dogs for a walk. And there I've just, oh, dare I say it, multitasked or tandem tasked.
Yeah. No, but what's interesting about what you're saying there with prioritization is that there are layers. Like, I think that's the other thing too, is I think people, when they think about priorities, they think purely about tasks, right? Like, what's my priority of the thing today? But there are layers, right? Like you talked about, like theming, when I talk about time, like giving yourself an overarching focus for the month, for the day, lends itself to prioritization, but not necessarily for the task, but it will help you select the tasks that make sense for that, for you to kind of live up to whatever you've prioritized. And so I think that when you think about prioritization in that way, it does make it a lot more accessible. It simplifies things to a degree, and it leads to less, overwhelm, allows you to optimize. Like, you can think of things in that term, but to your point, and again, we did not, as we were going through these, we selected them on our own. We didn't like get together and say, how are we going to orchestrate this? But really, my word kind of, again, leans into this, and it's about perspective. Perspective is my word, because I think that a lot of the ways we approach things is related to the perspective that we have, whether it's something that we have looked at in terms of like what else is going on, like you mentioned the season, so that helps shape our perspectives, or who we're dealing with will help us deal with the perspective that we should take. But also just, when you take a step back, and that's what perspective often requires you to do, is take a step back and really take a look around and examine and reflect before you move forward. It helps you make better choices. It helps you move forward in the direction that makes the most sense. And I think perspective is one of those things where if we're moving so quickly through our days, our weeks, our months, we can lose track of that. And we need to kind of do like a perspective check to make sure that, hey, is this making the most sense right now? Am I looking at this from the right vantage point? And again, this is not something that you can readily teach. It's just something that can happen the more you practice it. Again, practice could have been very well a word that we chose as well, because perspective is going to change, as not just based on your situation, but based on you and how you've made your way. Like, as you age, things change. Perspective for, like, again, think of, where is your daughter going to college again? Is she close or is she far away?
She's about a half hour away.
Okay. My daughter is a 4-5 hour flight away. So same instance, both off at college, different perspectives. Like, my daughter won't be coming home for the Thanksgiving holiday here in Canada. She'll be coming home for Christmas, here for a couple of weeks, and that's it. So that helps me, again, with prioritization. What am I going to do while she's here? Well, December is my month for relationships. It's perfect for that because she's home. So that's where I can focus my energy. But I wouldn't be able to look, and because my daughter's off at school, at college, my son just started high school, Grace being gone and Colton being here, and I'm like, 5 years, Colton will be gone. I start to look at it through that lens. So that gives me perspective, like you were talking about. But again, my perspective, the way what you're dealing with, what I'm dealing with, completely different, yet same. So perspective helps you kind of deconstruct that a little bit, and then allow you to actually move forward in a way that makes a whole lot of sense. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets back to, I think we were talking about awareness, as well as some other words that had to do with like checking in. I mean, I think that, we talked about journaling. That it all ties into this. It's, having that, it's a frequency, and a, like, I'm trying to think of what the word is. It's the journey. In other words, where are we at in the journey?
Yep.
So,
by the way, how did I get stuck with the tough letters as we start heading into the home stretch? I think it's just because the episodes land on Wednesdays and your lands on Mondays. So it just kind of worked out that way. So I've got the letter Q. Now, Q isn't as tough as some of the other letters that we've got. And my letter for Q, I mean, it shouldn't surprise anybody because I talk about this a lot. I could have said qualitative, but I talk about quality. And for me, oh man, I mean, this is, and you've got quality control was one of the things that popped up. That was one of the words that came up that we got from AI, but quality control, quality in general. And when I think about quality, if any of you have read Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or Lila, an inquiry into morals, or even his posthumous release, which is called On Quality. He was really searching for what was held within the term quality, either the small letter Q quality or the big capital Q quality, which he defined as well. The reason again, and this goes back to Tim's comment about like caution about going to extremes. For me, the word quality is cautionary in that make sure that you have qualitative or quality in the work that you deliver as opposed to just quantity. So, quality involves checking off the right boxes, whereas quantity is let's see how many boxes I can check off. If we can get some balance between quality and quantity, that to me is the truly productive part. That's where productiveness lives. It's that state of being productive as opposed to productivity, which is the activity of producing. And abundance in that regard can show up in like the quality, like how abundant is it in quality as opposed to just a numerical count. So I brought that up because I will beat the drum, just like journaling and many things, I'll beat the drum of like, this is something we need to take into account. If you are making a lot of stuff, but the stuff sucks, then you're not being productive. So where do we find that balance? And it's not 50-50. It changes as well. But if we can find a way, and we've touched on many of them, to allow for quality to exist without forsaking quantity, and vice versa, allow us to be quantitative with what we're doing, but also not forsaking quality in the process, that's where productivity really does shine.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the example that I made last time with the word consistency, which I think talks about this. And I think it was Laura Vanderkam that made the example of, you name what consistency looks like. You give the frequency that you can then say, okay, I showed up 100% of the time, or 90+% of the time. And the example was, I think from her, but possibly somebody else, Kendra Adachi maybe, of the goal was sit down as a family to have dinner at a dinner table. Well, quality food is healthy and life-giving and all that, but in the time and doing it as often as you say consistently, you want to have that happen. But if it's not going to happen because time isn't there to create the quality food, you go with the fast food, which is less quality, but it still means you sat down and achieved the goal within reason.
Yeah. Now, however, this is interesting because we've seen a rise of higher quality fast food, Shake Shack, as examples. Like a lot of burger joints, you're getting these, kind of highfalutin, for lack of better terms. There I go. I'm aging myself. I'm 50. Highfalutin. These highfalutin burger joints that are like, they're not the McDonald's. They're not the Jack in the Boxes or whatever. You're getting like higher quality. It doesn't mean that it's, going to be as good as that quality, like home cooked gourmet meal, but there are now more choices. That means like, you don't just have to run to like, Denny's or which, I mean, again, in a pinch, you might do that depending on what's available. Again, it's proximity, availability, all that stuff. But I think that
it's not a perfect analogy, but
no. But
you kind of get the gist of it.
No,
you wouldn't want to eat the lower quality consistently.
Yeah, exactly. It's never going to, but the thing is there's the nuance, which we've brought up again, which probably should have been my N word other than nurturing. It should have been nuance, because nuance is a huge deal. But
we're going to go back and listen to these.
Yeah. And I'm really going to beat
before we make a choice next time.
And when I go back to listen to them, I'm going to have a lot of time to myself to do that, because that's how I do it when there's silence, which is kind of what let's get into.
Yes.
There's one word that we can think of. There's several of them, not many in Q, but what was the one that you chose?
Yeah, I chose quiet time. I could have just went with quiet. As an introvert, this is key for me. I need time by myself. Now, it doesn't have to be quiet time for an introvert to recharge, but it has to be less. It needs to not be this, what you and I are doing right now. In other words, this is great, and I love doing this, but this is like me putting on the Iron Man suit.
Yeah,
I'm out there and I'm in action. But for me to Tony Stark think and recharge and have the ideas to come up with, I have to go into the Tony, in what is it, the Avengers cave, or his Malibu mansion where he's downstairs making all the different the mark, this, that, and the other of the armors.
Yeah,
so,
and boundaries and guardrails can help you, create that quiet time. I mean, I can give you an example. Right now, for those that are listening, there's an electrician working upstairs, and we've had lots of disrepair and stuff, people coming and going out of the house for the last 3 months. the quiet has been hard to come by, which means I've had to find time. Again, as a night owl, I've been able to do it later, but I've had to adjust my schedule to get that quiet. Because you're right, some work is only the quality of that work, the quality of the output is kind of extended, or actually maybe even just found in the quiet, because that's where that stuff can really come to life.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, and I like to do it. I like to do it in the, I bookend the day with it, basically. Like I have time by myself starting the day. And I also, after we've done my R word for the day in the morning and evening, time by myself, which is also part of that, I guess. Quiet time, winding down. So
now we talked about like how I got kind of the weird letters, but then we get a nice run of like the 3 most common letters in the alphabet right after that. And this is the first one, which is the letter R. So what is your R word?
My R word is routine, or routines, I guess is another way you could put it. And, for me, it's what's the order of the things that, what are the things I do every day, but also what's the order of the things that I do every day to start the day or to end the day, or what's the mid-afternoon routine. It is a checklist. It's a workflow. It's it's an if this, then that, if you will, of wake up, time by myself. These days I'm not grabbing. Well, I did this morning, but I'm lowering my caffeine intake. I'm trying to do that. So I did a instead of 2 scoops, I did 1 scoop, and I did a smaller cup. And so, and honestly, I'm actually making it the night before and putting it in the refrigerator. So all I need to do is go pull it out and heat it up.
Yeah.
So that's become part of the routine. I kind of like doing it quiet and by myself in the evening, and then doing it as part of my setting up for the next day.
Yep.
And then while the weather's nice enough, I'm sitting out on my back deck with that warm cup of coffee, and I'm in silence. I'm just the moon was out this morning. That was great. The stars were there and then went away, and just noticing these changes and watching what looked like an airplane, but it was clouds in the formation of one, just kind of pass along. And just, I'm not creating something. I'm not capturing anything. I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I'm just kind of waking up, letting the blood slowly flow first, and then move on to what's the next step. Probably my wife waking up, and we're talking and making breakfast and things first.
See, for me, routine is huge. And we talked about habits was my word. So routines are really just habits stuck. It's a way to kind of stack habits upon one another. One of the things that I think is important about routines, number one, evening and morning routines bookend your day. I think they're huge, right? And I'm a big proponent of the evening routine because it allows, whether you're a night owl like me, or whether you're an early riser, or even somebody that falls somewhere in between, it allows you to set up the next day and hit the ground running. But routines can show up in the middle of the day, workout, like all of the routine kind of grounds you. And the key to routines, I believe, and I wrote about this, in my book, and I've also written about this before. I think you've touched on this too, is that you want to make these routines as portable. Austin Kleon's talked about this before, the portable routine, and as bulletproof or future-proof as possible. So, if you've got something in that routine that you can't do from wherever you're at, then you might want to reevaluate it so that, there's less friction with it. And I think that to me, part of my evening routine is my R word, which is a piece of what, you touched on, being with yourself, catching up with yourself. Journaling is a factor, but reflection. Reflection is my R word. And to me, I actually literally, before we recorded today, had a conversation with David Allen again, which is one of the episodes. We did a flashback episode, and I just did a bit of a catch up with David, and reflection came up. Like, he's like, we don't spend enough time reflecting like that. And he said, that's a problem. When I asked him, what's something that you've seen and, you're glad that it's out there, as well as what have you, what kind of, ticks you off or you're worried about or concerned about when it comes to productivity. And to him, it's still like reflection. Like, why are we need to take time for reflection. Reflection precedes and follows every action we do, either in a small way or a big way, right? Like, a weekly review is bigger, a journaling entry is bigger, but maybe not quite as big as a weekly review. An annual review can be massive, but just like thinking about the thing that you did, think about it before you do it, and think like those brief moments. Sometimes we're reflecting without even really knowing it. So being deliberately reflective. And Tim brought this up, one of the premium members, when he talked about quality. Just like with quality, you need to have an end in mind for it, because you could be pursuing quality endlessly, and then that is where you get stuck. You can't just be constantly reflecting on the thing. You actually have to do the thing, right? So reflection is a piece, but there's again a nuance to it. So I'm big on reflection. You obviously have that incorporated into your routine, and I really think, just like with quality, just like with journaling, I will bang that drum consistently, because it's something that we've been doing forever, and it's something that we have more time to do than we're willing to give ourselves credit for.
And it doesn't take that long, especially if you're doing it, you have your increments, if it's daily, it doesn't have to be longer than 5-10 minutes. If it's weekly, it can be, and it should be probably more than just daily or weekly.
Mm-hmm.
It should be like longer amounts of time for the larger amounts of time, incrementally. It's a morning for the quarter. Like, you take a morning. I had 2 episodes with a friend of mine all about this, so I should probably this is your show. I'm not gonna give you.
You can we'll link to it in the show notes.
These are pretty good episodes.
Yeah.
You'd probably love them if you haven't heard them. And I think it goes along with this. We talked about retreats and how many, taking a half day, a cave day, all these different increments of those that you can do: annual, quarterly, monthly, etc. So
yeah, Eric, in the community, so we'll link to those episodes in the show note. But in my community, we have like focus fix sessions, which could be used for reflection. We have the Ready retreat that happens up to 3 times a year. That's a larger piece of reflection. And then occasionally we have these things called If Day, which is immersive focus, a small letter I, as opposed to the big, kind of focus fix, which is more of an intense focus. The If Days that we have, which happen again with a modicum amount of frequency, like 3-4 times a year. That's like an all day where you could be immersed in focus, and reflection is part of all of that stuff. And the thing is that if you do this kind of reflection consistently, you've got to figure out how to do it in a way that you can do it consistently, but also sustainably. And that's the word I chose. That's the letter S word for me, is sustainably. Yeah. We don't hear about sustainability enough in this world. We hear about consistency, and we touched on that in your episode, the consistency aspect. And we alluded to it, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because consistency, like, you could be consistent if you do something once a week. You could be consistent if you do something once a year, right? Like that. You need to figure out the balance between consistency and sustainability. And when I talk about sustainability, it's what can you sustain? What can you keep up with? And in a world that's increasingly giving us external demands, we have to kind of get that cadence down for ourselves. And that, again, takes reflection to do. It takes time, it takes thought, and it takes slowing down. So to me, sustainability is kind of one of that. And when I talk about time crafting, it's simple, flexible, durable, and sustainable. I highlight the sustainable aspect because it will stand the test of time, provided that you've given thought to it so that it will be able to stand the test of your time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that kind of goes to my S word, which is simplification, and distilling things down to their absolute, least common what a minimum viable dose. That's the kind of attempt I'm making here to say something of relevance. And I remember the first time I ever heard it was Michael Hyatt that used that term, and I thought, wait, what is he talking about? It's like, well, you don't take 5 Tylenol or 5 ibuprofen because your body, one, will reject it, and you only need 2. Well, one, you only might need 1 if you're not taking them as often. But what's the maximum you can do at any given time, and what's the minimum you need to make any difference? And it's kind of that awareness. It's that consistency. It's that knowledge. It's that knowing. And so, yeah, trying to just distill things down into their least viable or minimum viable needed.
Or the S word that you've chosen, which is
simplification.
Simplification. That's really what you're talking about here too. Again, these kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. So my S word of being simplification, that's what I'm going for, is like essentially what, and again, this can go into, there's the trap again of over optimizing or oversimplifying, but it's like, yeah, but there's less of a chance if you're scaling it back and you're getting it down to its essence. There's a certain point where you can't go any further.
Right.
So there's a certain point where you're stopped and you're done tweaking. There's no more tweaking possible. for now.
And
Again,
by the way,
Seasons play a part.
I think that, again, we can't confuse simplification or simplifying with ease or easy. Like, simplification can lead to ease, but doing simple and easy are different, right? And I think when you get that distinction, it makes it simpler and easier to simplify in a lot of ways. Once you understand that, like, again, that what's that adage? Easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life, right? Simplification plays a role in that. And so when we hear the term minimalism or Zen or whatever, really simplifying is kind of what, if you do that, then I think that's that. Oh gosh, here we go again. There's more nuance inside of that than, because minimalism seems to have this idea of like, you need to get down to this, right? But, we were talking about this in one of our Time Crafting Trust social hours, just, again, as we're recording this, just literally before we hit record, about fountain pens, right? Like, I have a bunch of fountain pens. I love my fountain pens. They all have different colors in them. Some are not being inked right now. If someone say, well, you need to minimize that, I'm like, no. I know what each of them are for. And I love, there is something that brings joy to me when I switch a pen over and things like that. So, but I don't have 43 different types of things that I'm, quote, collecting or gathering or whatever. So I've created some simplified elements within those smaller amount, like those very few things that I collect or that I hold dear, or tools of that nature. And this applies to tools. We've not, by the way, not mentioned a single app as the words yet in either episode. Spoiler alert. We're getting close to the end where we might be able to do one. In fact, the letter T, we might be able to do one. But Derek, but did we choose one, Eric? Did we choose? Was your word? Did you choose an app or no?
I don't believe I ever chose an app.
Well, what did you choose for the letter T?
So for T, I chose triage. I think this is one of the things that I've had to allow myself to have as a structured part of my day.
Mm-hmm.
I do triage in the beginning of my work day, air quotes, and at the end. I try to, and to be honest, I find that, especially when it comes to, we talked about inboxes in the last episode. We talked about Merlin's inbox 0. I actually like to go with his not with the definition that's not his, with the actual, like, there are 0 in, like, I like to have it tidy,
clean. Yeah. Mise en place, right?
Like clean. I like an empty inbox. The reason is because then it's quicker to triage.
Sure.
I'm not looking through stuff I've already looked through, or glancing at it, or, to go back to your earlier O word, overwhelm is less possible there because I don't have a stack sitting there versus only just the new stuff.
Yeah.
So
Tim chimes in again. Triage is so useful when feeling overwhelmed, right? And here's here's the kicker though. And this is what, when I hear triage, it's important to understand what triage is, as opposed to, again, terms like inbox 0, terms like, triage isn't about, if you're constantly in triage mode, like constantly, and you're not being deliberate about it, that's an issue. When you think about triage, you go to an emergency room. There's a lot of people in that emergency room. I don't care where you are. And then the triage goes, okay, you go here and you go here and you go here. Like, there is some filtration that eventually happens, right? And they're just trying to get you to where you need to be. And then dust settles a bit. It may not feel that way, but they're like, okay, now we can treat you in the way that, you're having a heart issue, you go this way. Oh, you've got a broken thing, you go this way. Like, it may not happen right away. And certainly in Canada, there are issues when you go to the emergency room that could take some time, which often is emblematic of what an email inbox can look like as well. But it's the same as when people say to me, like, oh man, I fight fires all day long. I'm like, well, then you've got a problem. Like, and also, what do you mean by fighting fires? Because firefighters will let things burn so that they can save other things, right? So when you say, oh, I'm spending firefighting, I'm like, well, first off, you better understand what that means, like in the real world, versus, I'm just willy-nilly spraying things and that means you're just scattered. You need to get some agency, some control over this. Triage is everything coming at you that you either haven't dealt with yet, or is coming at you in such a way that you just go, okay, you wait here and then I'll deal with you. As opposed to, again, recklessly putting it in places. And triage can lead to that reckless productivity, which is not where you want to be. You don't want to be in that realm. And the thing is once you start treating like tasks that way and things that come your way, you can get to the T word I have, which David Allen also alluded to, both in his book, Getting Things Done, in our conversations, and in his new book, he talks about it too. It comes up again. Clarity is one word, but trust is another. And trust is my word. If you don't trust the frameworks you've applied, if you don't give time to allow you to trust them, then you're going to be consistently working from a place of less than, a place of lack, right? So, a lot of people, when they adopt a system or adopt an app, they want that hack. They want it to work right away. Like if it doesn't work right away, then something's wrong. Like I'll just go back to the way I used to do things, right? I come across this all the time when I teach time crafting, because it's not something that you can just go, all right, great. I'm going to theme all my days and do all that. I'm like, no, because that will not help you trust it. You want to find something that you can rely on and then start building that trust. It's like, again, it's not like a relationship, right? When I met my wife, I didn't go, hey, guess what? We're going to get married and we're going to have this. She would have gone, whoa, slow down. Let's nurture this thing before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So you have to build a relationship with it, whether it's a system, an app, any of these words that we've discussed, balance, quality, all those things, workflows, and build them, and use them consistently and sustainably. Man, we're bringing up all the words so that you can start to establish trust. Because once you trust it, it makes it so much easier for you to follow it with the understanding, with the knowledge, with the resolve that you can actually get more of the right things done.
Yeah, having that trust, I mean, it's trust in yourself, it's trust in others and expectations, it's trust in your system, it's trust in yourself. I think I may have redundantly said some of those things, but anyway, you have to have some of that in order to progress at all. Because if you don't, then you don't know what to do next. You have to trust yourself that you've already pre-thought and set your schedule. You have to trust that you've made the plan and you're going to stick with the plan, or you got to trust the person that's giving you the plan if it's not you.
Yep.
So,
well, and boundaries help establish trust. The things we were talking about, like there's lots of things that when you start to implement them, they will help you establish trust, but trust takes time. And you can't say how much time it's going to take because time has other plans for us. Like sometimes it may take longer for one person for this to take hold than another. So it is one of those things, but I can tell you that when it comes to trust, if you build a trustworthy system, if you start to, have that in play, then it'll help you deal with what my U word is, which is uncertainty. Because the only thing that's certain is uncertainty. Like there will always, I don't know when that doorbell is going to ring next for the electrician or the next tradesperson to show up. Not only because they have not been following through on their communication protocols to tell me when they're coming, they're just showing up. So I can't trust that. So I have to I have to build something that will allow me to cultivate certainty where there is uncertainty. And I think the tricky part here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is we can try to control what won't be controlled instead of coping with what won't be controlled. And instead so by doing that, we avoid the opportunity of commanding what we can have some agency over. So we need to, again, take a step back, reflect, recharge, whatever you want to use, so that we can kind of go, okay, well, I know that where can I find certainty in this? Can I find certainty in this? Because uncertainty is we're never not going to have that. So I would love to hear your thoughts on like this idea of because I think we spend a lot of time trying to control what won't be controlled. And then that puts us, it actually short circuits our ability to deal with uncertainty.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've said a lot over time has been, you have agency. You have more than you thought.
Mm-hmm.
You have more agency than you think, but you also have less than you think. We think that we can control everything. So it's like, again, it's a Venn diagram. What you think you can control, what you actually can control. And then it's that middle ground where, acceptance.
Yeah.
Or acceptance of the uncertainty, in other words.
And it's all the soft skills, awareness. By the way, it's funny when you mention that, it's like, again, we are terrible at this calculation of chronological time. Whenever I do workshops, I will do a variation of this exercise where I'm like, we're going to sit and do nothing for 1 minute, or I'm going to give you this many minutes to do this exercise. And invariably, every time I say, you'll have 5 minutes, I give them 4 minutes and 18 seconds. Or I go, you're going to have 5 minutes, I give them 6 minutes and 12 seconds. And then at the end, they're like, why did this feel different? I'm like, well, because it wasn't 5 minutes. Like nothing was 5 minutes. Sorry, I didn't mean to break your trust in me, but like you are not good at, and the best is when I ask people, let's sit for 60 seconds and do absolutely nothing. And the people get anxious and nervous and they're like, I feel like I'm bored. What am I doing? Da, 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 da. And then the people who've meditated and spend time in meditation, they're able to go, that didn't feel like a minute. Like it felt fine. Like, but it didn't feel like a minute. I'm like, well, you're right. It wasn't. It was 42 seconds. Like that's all it was. And people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, because we are not good at we cannot be certain that we know exactly how much time has passed, especially when we're in things like flow state, which you talked about and things like that. I was talking to my son about this last night. We were talking about like how the things he loves to do. He's like, man, like time just doesn't, I'm like, time doesn't matter. Like weirdly enough, chronological time when you're in those states really doesn't matter. You're not taking it into account. And that's where, again, all these other things kind of float away. But speaking of not being able to correctly estimate or understand how much chronological time has passed, I think this leans in nicely and bookends and dovetails nicely into your word.
Yeah, I chose underestimation. And in parentheses, I put, and its risks. It's dangerous to underestimate. We and overestimate. I mean, I think we again, there's a trap here. It's almost easier for me to describe the dangers of the words than it is to describe what they actually are. But for me, it's like underestimation is, oh yeah, I can get that done in 5 minutes. It's a half-hour task.
Yeah,
I'm wrong. But I think it's going to take me 5 minutes, so I overcommit, which leads to overwhelm. Or the other way where I underestimate, or I overestimate how long it's going to take something to get done. And it's actually something super easy, but because of the way that I've structured it, broken it down, looked at it at a macro level instead of a micro level, and said, oh my gosh, no, that email is a project in my mind.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I got to research. I got to figure out what it is I want to say. Then I'd have to figure out the words I want to use. Then I need to make sure it sounds good. Then I need to, and you get all these different passes. Actually, another way AI is very helpful.
Yep.
Gets us through those first initial steps. It gets us past that, that fight or flight to a certain extent. So underestimation is where I'm going with you on this one.
Let's get into the V's. Again, when we did your episode, I mean, V is my second favorite letter after M, because we could have gone with Vardy on here. I did not go with Vardy, to be clear.
No.
Could have gone with ego here, maybe. No. What V letter did you choose? Because again, we're getting into the home stretch here where the letters are V. There's a lot of options for V though. So what did you choose?
I chose velocity. I think this is one of the things where people come to productivity either because they're not getting enough done or they want to get more done. So we're going to go with the more, and we're going to go with the speed. So, and this goes to optimization and leverage and all these other things where it's like, there are probably places in your life where you can get more done just by tweaking something a little bit so it can be done faster or get more done faster. And again, without going into the trap of that and trying to make everything go faster, because some things you need to slowly enjoy. Like I said this morning with my sitting out on the back deck, I want to make my morning go fast so that I want to make that go slow. I want to feel that slow actually. But sometimes and so maybe it's about knowing when to push the gas and when to go fast.
Yeah. So to me, when we were looking at these words, because we're getting into those words where they are harder to come to something with it, like to really bring, like what word, because vision's another word that we could have chosen and all that stuff. What I like about velocity is it makes you think. It's not speed. It's not hurry. You mentioned the term hustle in your episode, which I want you to go back and listen to what you talked about. Like if you're listening to this right now, which you are, go back and listen to your episode, because the way you and I kind of get into hustle, I think is important too. But velocity, it's almost like a mindful way of thinking about speed or pace or, again, like you said, take your foot off the gas versus, putting the brakes on, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not even more about pausing, because really velocity is, like, we hear the term terminal velocity and things like that, so I was mentioning this again in a call with my community, the idea of when my son and I were at, we were in a car simulator at an arcade, like an actual simulator, not one of those arcade games, which he kicks my butt in every single time. But we were actually in a simulator of a vehicle, and I wiped the floor with him because I understood when I was going around the bend not to put my foot on the brake, but just to take my foot off the gas a little bit. Whereas he was going full bore, and then when he hit the curve, he's like, I got to brake. Well, what happened when he braked? The car flipped and did all that stuff. And he's like, what the heck? I'm like, yeah, you just take your foot off the gas a bit and you can make that turn. And in the arcade versions, that doesn't happen. Like, you don't get the same kind of reaction. So again, I like that term velocity. I think it's, and Tim brings this up. I'll add this to the broadcast here, but in physics, velocity is speed with direction. So there you go, right?
You know why you're applying the speed, because you want to go that direction and you want to go that direction fast.
We're going to get into another weird word, I think, for this, or something you might not think about. And I chose veracity. You've got velocity. I've got veracity. So for those who don't know what that is, it's more of like an honesty or truthfulness when, or even an accuracy level. So I've been thinking a lot about accuracy in terms of being productive and precision in particular. And what I like about the term veracity, is if you approach the things that are on your to-do list or your days with a sense of veracity, it's almost like a virtue of sorts, which virtue could have been one that we chose as well, which did not show up as one of the words that kind of we it was in our rough draft. I don't think it's in there. No, it's not. To me, if you are honest with your capabilities, with your limitations, and you're willing to, adhere to them and not try to short circuit them again, it allows you to kind of move, like with velocity, in the direction that you want to go without any form of regret, with less hesitation, right? In a measured, reasoned way. And when I talk about in the book, The Productivity Diet, the idea of the 3 realms of productivity: reckless productivity, ruthless productivity, and reasoned productivity, applying veracity to that third realm allows you, or just to productivity in general, to your days, your work, allows you to live more in that reasoned realm, which is, I think, the place that we want to spend more time in than any of the other ones, because reckless has you off in a multitude of different directions. It's ruled largely by emotion. And ruthless is largely ruled by logic, which can lead to that burnout, that overwhelm, that myopic, where you're like, wait, what happened to this other project you were working on? And again, David and I talked about this earlier, and we'll link to that show in the show notes as well, that episode, where he said, like, the idea of the idea of, and I lost my train of thought here for a second, but the capabilities, the prior, like all of these things, reason makes a lot of sense. And again, back to the idea of, I've gathered my thoughts now. So the idea of ruthless is, we don't just have one project. David said it would be nice if we had one project. How many of you only have one project? None of us do. We have multiple ones. So if you can live in the reasoned realm of productivity and be honest, and again, approach your list, your days with veracity, then you're going to be able to make measured progress on multiple projects as opposed to just the one, right? So to me, that was why I chose it. Again, it's maybe a word that doesn't get associated with it very often, if at all, but I liked it. It's mentioned in my book, so I threw it in here. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Eric? I mean, you probably saw that word because you did get to see these words in advance a little bit.
Yes.
But you're like, what does Mike mean by that? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly sure. One, I was like, I don't know what that word even necessarily means. It's not one I hear very often. we're in the chunk of the alphabet where that's going to happen. I think you explained it perfectly. I really don't have much to add on this one, to be honest.
Imagine applying veracity and velocity at the same time. I think you just stay with.
I thought that was.
Yeah, just stay with the letter V and you're fine. We don't need to move on to the next letter. Actually, W is a little bit easier. So I chose, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's listened to me for a long time, especially with my affinity to the Green Lantern. but I chose willpower. But I actually added the term will in there instead, because there's a lot of acrimony and a lot of debate around whether willpower is a thing. I mean, Benjamin Hardy wrote a book called Willpower Doesn't Work, and yet David Allen contributed to a book that's called Willpower, right? So I prefer the term will over willpower because, again, to me, the willingness or the will to do, the will to, move forward when you maybe don't necessarily feel like you can, and finding ways to do it. I think that's the key. That's where will comes in. Like I don't really have the energy, maybe the capability, maybe the bandwidth, but if you tap into will, which often associates itself with, again, like the energy that you have, the strength that you have, again, this morning, my will is very low. In the afternoon, my will is high. Most people, it's the other way around. The ability to have that, to make choices that make sense and pushed you down that path of reason as opposed to anywhere else. Will to me is a big one. And again, it's qualitative, which is tricky because if you were to go to somebody and say, well, I don't really have the will to do that, they're going to go, I don't care. Right. So, whereas, internally, and again, the conversation I had with my son, I'm like, they're saying to him in school, you're in that proficient phase, but you could be in the next level. You could be extending if only you applied yourself more. You have the potential for that. And he was saying, but Dad, I don't like this stuff. Like, I don't have the will to go to that level, to at least in some of them. And I'm like, well, that's okay. This is where veracity comes up. Like, tell your teacher that. Say, you know what? Yeah, I know I could do that, but I don't like this. So I'm going to do what I need to do to be proficient. And the things that I want to be extending in, I will. So what are your thoughts on will and willpower?
Yeah, I'm going to tie it into a word that we did not use for M.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody already listened to that episode, I think. So other than the people that are listening to this live for the first time,
Yep.
A word we didn't use was motivation.
Yeah.
Could have easily been one. I think that's one of the things, like, if you're motivated, if you want to, well, there's a difference between wanting to and needing to. And I think will is more of it's not just I want to do this. It's I need to do this, as the acronym that you often use.
Yeah.
I can't think of.
Need to do, ought to do, want to do. Yeah. Like will allows you to kind of it allows you to create a distinction between the ought to do to decide whether it's a need or a want, and not leave it as an ought to do, but then allows you to push through the urgent to get to the important. I mean, will is the sustained element of motivation, I think. Motivation, I think, gets you going. Momentum is there too. I think all of it, which is what you chose for M.
That's
true. And then will, I think, is the thing that can kind of keep you, like, it's what fuels those things, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I love that there's nuance for all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole podcast episode to group just those words together. In fact, that's something we could do periodically throughout the year before we do the next one. Is once a quarter, we pick 3, 4, 5 of the words from these 2 episodes and do a deep dive on the nuance between them as they are related to each other.
Absolutely. That'd be great. And we'll put it to the YouTube chat right now that we've got for my community and see if that's something they'd be interested in, because I think that'd be great. It sounds like that would be something that we could focus on. Let's focus on your W word right now, though. What is it?
Yes. So I chose wins. I think this is one of the things that motivates you when you feel like you're doing things over and over and over, but you're not feeling like there's especially in the digital world, when there's not a completed thing. There's not a widget that you cranked and it's done in front of you. It's all amorphous. I think that's the thing, is like, you want to know you've got a win. So you want to have those mile markers. You want to celebrate those. You want to say, okay, I completed this work. I achieved this thing. And obviously there's more to do and more to go, but I hit this mile marker on this timeline, this journey, throwing out all these kind of interconnected things now.
But we need those wins, right? Like we need like small wins, big wins, like that's dopamine right there, right? Like we get those dopamines, big and small, right? And we can, wins can go, I mean, if you're struggling with journaling, for example, or reflection, focusing on your wins is a great place to start, because it's positive for the most part, as opposed to your challenges or failings or struggles. But like earmarking those wins, I think, is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
We're moving on to the toughest letter of all. So for those that have stuck through to this, both live and also, listening to the episode as it's been released, the letter X. And Erik, because you get to start it off. So it leaves me with like the dregs, I guess, so to speak. But what is such as it is, what is your choice for the letter X?
I struggled with this one the most. This was hard, and you've got one that I had never heard of. So, and I just kept thinking, what are we trying to do with this? And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to cheat.
Yep.
I'm using the letter X, as in parenthetical, X marks the spot. And again, this kind of goes with what I was just talking about with wins. You want to identify what a win will be, small or large, so that you can aim for that and hit it and succeed and then move on to the next one. And it's by having those that any kind of progress along the journey is made. And since I'm going to lean on my S word simplification, that's all I'm going to say about that.
No, but you were talking about this is X has a bunch of different meanings here. So X could be the thing you put in the checkbox to say that you've done something.
I was thinking about that for a little bit, and I'm like, that's almost too outside the box.
The other thing you do is the X is like, I'm not going to do this. You cross it off, like as in I'm Xing it out. So there's like X actually, the letter has a...
Stop using up all the options for next year, man.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm using one that you've never heard of before. Gardeners might have heard of before. Actually, it's funny because David and I were talking a bit about gardening, if you listen to that episode. There is this term in where I live, and I think it's in a lot of climates where growth can be sparse, like desert climates and things like that. A type of gardening where it's low maintenance. You choose plants that don't need a lot of nurturing or water or anything like that. They can just survive with even in soil that isn't that great. And it's actually a type of gardening called xeriscaping, XERISCAPING. Of course, it's, we're going to put together a list of these words and such as an accompanying thing that was suggested in the chat. And I think it's a great idea. So I was like, how does this relate to productivity? Like what would this mean? And really there are a lot of things that are dynamic in the work that we do. And then there are some things that are static that if we plant the seeds and let them, they will do fine on their own for the most part. And I think that there are elements of that, I think xeriscaping, when you're looking at it from a productivity standpoint, is what are the things that I don't have to pay as much attention to that will still yield results that look quite good. And an example that I would probably use in this, and this is where apps can come into play, are those things that if you don't do them, then you'll notice it and you'll feel off about it. And these things are simple to take care of consistently, and they're often routine. Examples would be, putting up your holiday lights. Like that's a form to me that's like a xeriscaping aspect, because what we do is we often go around and we see, oh, the holiday lights are up in the block down the road. I'll do that when I'm, oh, right, I've got to do that. And then you don't put that in your garden. You don't put that in your to-do list to go when I should do that. Right. And now I have that in my to-do list because one year I didn't do it until it was like a week before Christmas or a week before Halloween. And it's like, oh no, I don't get so in Todoist, there we go. There's an app that I use for my personal stuff. Other than when it pops up, you go, oh yeah, I got October 1st. Like that to me, it's not that's put up Halloween decorations. Kind of lines into, because you're right. This letter was tough. Decorations. I'll probably dig into this term a bit more in relation to productivity. Marie Pullen talks about the idea of tended to. You're like, gosh, wow, this looks permaculture, great. And this kind of what I've got in front of me. The landscape looks, not just like a mess.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, I was a little unfamiliar with the word,
and I have to look for things. It's like this looks good. It's time to get close to wrapping up with the last two letters. Thanks for sticking with us so far. When it comes to why I am finally going with some kind of practical workflow that is more to illustrate how many are out there and why there's no wrong one to use as long as you apply one. And this is related to email management and an email workflow. This is something that the late Tony Hsieh used to use, who was part of Zappos, and it was called Yesterbox. And it was a way for him to process emails. I don't know if you can still find the term on the blog post that was written about it online, but I will find some way to share it with you in the show notes. But his idea was like he wants to get his emails through up until yesterday. And some of the stuff from today, most of the stuff from that day didn't get addressed unless it absolutely had to. So again, being decisive about how to process email is what Yesterbox does. There's other methods that do this. The stack method is one. I know a lot of people look into that. I have my own email workflow called 3Mail, right? Which is like, I don't use my inbox as a storage device. It's more of a loading zone. And then things go and they're correlated with daily themes and all that stuff, which works fine for me and others that have applied time crafting. So to me, the reason I chose that one, again, why is a tricky one? We could go with year and all that stuff. And there's lots of things that we could do there. But I thought, I wanted to draw attention to like one of the biggest pain points with productivity, which is email. And the key here is, much like a to-do list, much like personal knowledge management, which came up, if you don't have a workflow to handle your email and you're just handling it rough, like whack-a-mole style, that's going to wreak havoc with your productivity. So Yesterbox is just one of them. And I thought I would draw attention to that in the hopes that it would help you as the listener think about, okay, I really need to think about the way I manage my email.
Yeah. And I've alluded a little bit as to what I do in these 2 episodes. So I'm not going to belabor, I guess is the better word, going into that. But yeah, there are different approaches. I would just say clean or cleanliness or orderly is the way I approach it.
Which is fine.
I found that works best for me.
Yep, which is fine. And I mean, again, you get to decide. Again, there's lots of nuance in there. And by the way, with any of these workflows, I don't care whether it's email management, time management, productivity, workflows, whatever, you need to apply your own personalization to them. Like they're not, it's like your phone. If you pull your phone out of your, when you buy a new iPhone or a new Android device, it's installed with it's built the way they want you to use it. And you need to take some time to set it up the way that you want to use it. So email is no different. And you just need to, and by the way, there's no static element with it, because Eric, it may change for you the way you deal with email, just like it has changed for me over the years. Right. So again,
Definitely.
this is important to important distinction. You have to figure out whether you're going to say no to this type of email management or no to this, but you're also going to have to, wait a minute, this is tying in nicely to your Y word. What's the opposite of no is?
Yes. So I chose yes because I like to be positive. I could have easily used NO for no for the N word, but I think, and again, better to determine it and say, or define it and say, you have to be careful about what you say yes to, because if you say yes to too many things, you can't do any or all of them. You have to only, and there's other terms that could come into play, like sunk cost fallacy. And what's the other one? I'm trying to think of what it is. But anyway, point being, if you're saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to all the other things. So, we're talking multiverse here, right? It's like we were talking about the multiverse way before Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. The variants the variants that exist, right? Because there's lots of them, right? Yeah. So no, absolutely.
And so, and the thing is, you can get tripped up on that and say, oh no, I can only say yes to one thing at any given time. And I can only say yes to having a snack, or yes to the coffee, or yes to the appointment in the email, or yes to that. And I'm saying no to everything else. Oh no, I'm overwhelmed by saying no to all these other great things too. And it's like, again, triage comes into play here.
Yep.
And a number of the other words that we've already mentioned. So I'm not going to belabor that, but it's about knowing, and it's about, I like to go with the positive. So I'm saying yes instead of no.
Well, it's time for you to say yes to share with us the last letter of the alphabet. And for you, I'll say, what did you choose for the letter Z?
This took some time too, but this is the one we'd already I was going to go with Z and zone for getting in the zone, but we kind of already talked about that enough. And so I went with Zoom, and I don't mean the tool. I don't mean Zoom as in, getting on a Zoom call. I mean zooming in and zooming out. It's the micro and the macro, which we've talked about earlier.
Yep.
It's about being able to do that quickly and easily. It's perspective with the big picture. It's zooming in, so it's micro, and you can say, okay, I'm going to deal with this day or this triage moment. It's being able to, I think of a microscope. I mean, turn the dial up and down to go in and out, and it takes practice. Another P word we didn't use, but zoom. That's zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah,
extreme close up.
and we need to do that a lot more often than we do, like you said. Like, I mean, it's important because that helps with perspective, which is another P word that we chose, right? I wonder, were you choked when I chose the one I chose? Because it's actually probably one of the it's hard to say, but it's probably the one that relates, differently and to productivity probably than any other ones that we were kind of given when we put this together. Were you kind of like, I wish I had jumped on that one first.
I was not surprised that you went
the
out of your way to make
the
this
Zeigarnik
work.
effect, right? Which Zeigarnik, however you want to pronounce it, which is again the phenomenon that we remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. So again, this all goes back to the idea of mental clutter, capturing things, getting things out of your head, putting things in front of you. There's if you don't have a way to kind of track both qualitative tasks, quantitative, a combination of those things, then that can lead to stress, anxiety, and it can actually have an impact on your productivity. So we need to, there are ways to avoid this effect. And the simple thing is get it out of your head. Like, your mind is meant to be a factory, not a warehouse. Mind like water, like all those things. It will there will never be, much like with overwhelm, which we touched on, there will always be remnants of the Zeigarnik effect in your head, because capturing absolutely everything. And when I say capture everything, regret nothing, obviously there's, it's a bit reductive. I mean, we'd be spending all our days capturing consistently. It's more about like building the habit and then getting refinement within that habit. But the more you capture and get things in front of you so you can actually assess them, break those projects down, because that's where it comes into play. If you've got a project in your head that you haven't broken down, the Zeigarnik effect is going to remind you that you haven't done the project. Not just, you may have made progress on it, but there's elements of it that you haven't done, and it's going to show up again and again and again. So, to me, the other thing you can do is, and this, I actually use this with writing. So if we go back to writing, like the Hemingway method, where Hemingway would finish writing, he would interrupt his writing session by stopping like when the timer went off. So he'd be mid-sentence. That served him well, because the remnants there allow him to keep going. But in terms of to-do list stuff and that, it to me, knowing that you could fall prey to this is a reason to build capture habits.
It's better to go against it when it comes to completion of tasks. But when it comes to information or studying specifically, or creativity, when it comes to the thinking part of things, as you alluded to just now with Hemingway, it can be beneficial because your brain is still thinking about it. Your brain, in other words, hasn't flushed its RAM.
Yeah, you have attention residue, as Cal Newport would say. You open loops, like David Allen would say. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's one of the, I mean, it really gets to, I mentioned my daughter in college. She will sit and study for straight through just for like 2 hours for a test, and then go take the test. And I'm like, you have got to make flashcards where you flip through them in 5-10 minutes and then put them away, do something else, and come back and do that over and over, versus sit there and let your attention and your willpower, in many other words, dip down into a trough where you are literally not retaining anything additional when you're sitting there for that long. So,
yeah. And it can actually, I think one of the ways it can actually be harmful is if you cram. If you cram, you don't get the benefit of that. If you're cramming too late, you're not going to get the benefit of what this effect can offer you, and you actually end up falling prey to it in another way too. So it is interesting, as we go through all of these letters, how many of them related to one another, both across both episodes, but also within the very letters themselves. So we were say, oh, this P1 relates to the. So I'm looking forward to the next time we do this. And, the fact that, we spent about 2.5 hours talking about the A to Z is stunning to me. I imagine we could have gone longer, and we definitely could have. But for those that are here live watching this as we're recording it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, members of the Time Crafting Trust Premium membership, thank you for being here and throwing in your questions, chiming in with your own letters of choice. And Erik, this has been great. I'm looking forward to kind of exploring this further with you, both again a year from now when we can revisit it, but also dive deeper into these words over the course of the next year.
See, and there's the beauty of it. To go back to our first word, AI, feeding the transcripts of these two conversations into it and saying, all right, what were the words that and I think somebody in the chat mentioned it also when it came to, they want to see one big mind map of how all the words connect. I think AI might be able to do that now, or it will soon. So we're going to be able to lean on that and then say, okay, there's an episode. Like there's 4 or 5 episodes of connected words at minimum that we can do throughout the year.
At minimum. And the feedback we're getting in the chat is like Janet says that this has been such an interesting conversation. Grateful to have been here live. Gloria Jean, this was excellent. We heard the same thing with your episode as well. Like Kimmy, I was so absorbed in the conversation, I forgot I have a call that started 20 minutes ago. Yes, we ran long and we apologize for that. But I mean, again, I think it was a worthwhile conversation. I'm glad we did this. And again, this has been recorded 3 months in advance of when we're actually 3 months in advance, 4 months, 1, 2, 3 months in advance before we actually like release it. So they're, I'm looking forward to putting together some supporting materials. I think we can do that. Supporting materials for these episodes that people will be able to take away and use. The mind map might be tricky because we don't know if AI could do it, but we're willing, we got time, which is, a great thing. And we're out of time now with this episode. So Erik, thanks for being here. Where can people keep up with your work and what you're doing and learn more about and check out all the, beyond the to-do list? Like it's been around for a long time, right? So
I was going to say, if you made it to this point in this episode, I hope you listened to the first one.
Yeah.
You know where you found it, but it's at beyondthetodolist.com. That's where you can find me. You can shoot me a message through the site and or follow me on any of the socials that are there that are my preference, that are also yours.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. Erik, thanks again for having a productive conversation with me for your episode as well as for this one.
Thanks for having me.
And there it is. This mega crossover episode 2-part thing that Erik and I did is now in the books. I, again, strongly encourage you to revisit Erik's episode. Links to that are in the show notes, as well as this episode. Whenever you need a refresher on our choices of words related to what we do, what we talk about on our podcast, as well as outside of our podcast. But if you want to actually get some resources that we created for this episode, you can go to mikevardy.com/A2Z or A2Z, depending on wherever you are from. It doesn't matter. It's still the same URL, mikevardy.com/A to Z. And that way you can get some of those resources, including, maybe a bit of a description of each word that goes beyond what we shared in this episode and much more. So again, check that out. Again, mikevardy.com/A to Z. Big thanks to Erik for joining me for this conversation. Figured this is the time of year to share this kind of thing, and it was a great collaboration. Looking forward to doing more in the future. If you want us to do more in the future, please let us know. One way you can do that is subscribing to the podcast, following on Spotify, leave comments on this episode, on Erik's episode as well. That way we know whether or not we should do more things like this, what else you might want to know. And subscribing to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, it's one way to support the show, as well as sharing what you think and your thoughts on this episode, as well as many others. It helps make the show better. It helps us kind of figure out what we're doing well and what we might need to improve upon. So again, let us know. Ratings, reviews, and subscribing to the show. Again, one way to support the show. Another is to check out the sponsors that you heard peppered throughout our conversation today. Go to mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors. Any of those sponsors that resonate with you, click on their links, and that way they know that we sent you there. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well as the whole double episode, Erik's episode, my episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to doing more of those in the future. Next up, we have a Flashback Friday episode. It will be the last episode of the calendar year of 2024. I hope you will join me for that. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.